Hey everybody, welcome back to the MIKO Suit Supplies YouTube channel where I show you how to make some pretty cool stuff out of some really sparkly. Today you are in for a treat because I'm going to show you how I make the coolest, raddest, most awesome 80s workout panties. Just kidding. What I'm actually going to show you are the steps that I take for making figure suit bottoms. This is only part one, but in this entire tutorial I do use a serger and a sewing machine. If you don't have a serger, that's totally fine. I'm going to make a completely separate video for how you can make these bottoms just with a sewing machine. And it's totally possible because that's what I did for many years before getting a serger. So part one today, the next couple of parts will be released within this week, and let's get started. The first step that I take is to baste the back lining to the back shell piece 1/4 of an inch away from the crotch edge and only at the crotch edge. Then with right pieces or right sides together of your front piece and your back piece, we're going to pin the front to the back along the crotch seam. What you want to do here is make the curve of your back piece follow the curve of your front piece. Next, with your lining pieces facing each other, we're going to repeat that pinning to attach your lining piece, your front lining piece, that is. So starting again at the middle, follow the convex curvature of those front pieces. Using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to sew all of the layers together. Okay, so here you can see that I serged all of the layers together using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. But if you don't have a serger, that's totally fine. What you can do is stitch using a straight stitch all of the layers together, again at 3/8 of an inch away from the edge. And then to flatten out this bulk, you can zigzag stitch inside of that seam allowance and within that straight stitch that you made. It's not necessary for the crotch seam to stretch, so using a straight stitch is perfectly fine. Alright, so next what we're going to do is flip all of our pieces over. So here's your front piece. You're going to flip it, or flip your lining piece so that all of your lining, all of your front lining is aligned with your front shell piece. And then we're going to pin your lining to your shell all the way around. So now that your lining and your shell are pinned together all the way around, take the front hip strap, so just take one side of your front hip strap, and with right sides together match it to a back hip strap. And then pin it and sew the hip straps together at a using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now that you've straight stitched your hip straps together, you're going to open up that seam allowance and zigzag that seam open. Then trim away the seam allowance. At this point, after you have trimmed away your seam allowances at your hip straps, you're ready to apply the elastic. You may have noticed that I don't baste my lining to my shell pieces, and that's because I apply the elastic and attach the lining all in one step using my serger. It's a little bit more advanced of a technique, so I'll show you in a completely separate tutorial. I'll show you how to do all of this using your sewing machine only and no serger, and attaching your lining to your fabric before even applying the elastic. But for now, I'll move forward with showing you how I attach elastic and the lining to the shell all in one step using the serger. Whenever I apply elastic using my serger, I use the apply as you sew method rather than applying elastic in a round. This allows me to control the stretch a little bit better, and it also allows me to vary the stretch throughout the whole bikini. Starting at the hip seam, I'm going to start stitching here and apply it all the way around. Another thing to note is that my knife is disengaged. So now I have the elastic applied to both leg holes, and I also went ahead and serged the waistband without elastic. If you want to serge this, it's not necessary, but if you do want to serge it, don't pull. You don't need to pull on the fabric. It's just a way to make the edge look more finished, and it's a preferential thing. It's not a necessary thing to do. And let me walk you through how much you need to pull the elastic through the leg holes. So again, we started at the hip seam, and from the hip seam all the way past the crotch seam by about an inch, so past that crotch seam about an inch, pull the elastic 15 to 20% greater than its resting state. So I'll go over that again. Starting at the hip seam all the way to an inch past the crotch seam, pull your elastic 15 to 20% greater than the elastic's resting state. Once you get to that inch past the crotch seam and start applying the elastic to the butt area, I personally don't pull it all through the butt. And the reason being is that whoever's going to wear the bikini, whether it's you or your client, I prefer to have the back piece just lay nicely over the glutes. If you pull the elastic, you could potentially cause the bikini to cut into the glute, and which is no big deal. Again, it's a preferential thing, but personally I want this back piece to just lay nicely over that glute area without cutting into the booty. Okay, so once you get past that amount of no stretch, you'll get into the crook of the hip strap. So the transition from the main body again to the hip strap, you'll start pulling the elastic 15 to 20% greater than the resting state, and then ending at that hip seam. So one more time, just for clarity. Starting at the hip seam all the way past the crotch seam by about an inch, pull the elastic 15 to 20% greater than its resting state. As you go through the bum curve, don't pull at all until you reach the transition, this crook. Then start pulling again 15 to 20% greater than the resting state. Alright, so next I'm going to show you how to apply the elastic using the regular sewing machine to this hip, or not hip, I'm sorry, to this waist area all the way around. We've reached the end of part 1, so make sure to subscribe to the MIKO Suit Supplies YouTube channel in order to stay up to date on when parts 2 and 3 come out. In part 2, I'll show you how to apply elastic to the waistband as well as completely finish and top stitch all the elastic. Stick around. See you soon.